Hey everybody, Jerome here, Director of Student Ministries at Calvary Community Church in Lenexa, Kansas. I hope you've all had a wonderful week. I hope you've all enjoyed the really nice weather we've had outside and the nice 60s and 70s, just weather where you can just be comfortable outside, maybe had a good barbecue or something like that. But I hope so you took some time to enjoy that. But let's go ahead and jump into our lesson. The last 3 weeks we've been talking about a series called Canceled, talking about how cancel culture, but how cancel culture is not okay. That we shouldn't just go and when something doesn't go our way, just be like, it's canceled. Forget it. But how we should look at things other way. As you know, in week 1, we talked about how we should love people who are not like us. Instead of being like, oh, that kid's weird, he's sitting over the table by himself, forget it, canceled. You should take some time and show them love. Go sit with them, be with them. Last week, we talked about how we should help people in need. Now, we all help the people who really need help. You know, if somebody needs to be 911 called, we call 911. Someone's there for them. We help them out. We help with the big things. Now, that wasn't what I talked about. What I talked about was the little things. It could be someone struggling to carry the bag, someone who, again, another example is sitting alone at lunch. They just need somebody. Somebody has something in their teeth. How doing those little things, we should show love through that in our everyday life, and it should just be instinct. Now, this week, we're going to talk about how we should love people we envy. I have a question for you. Have you ever been jealous or envious? I'm going to take a minute, and I'm honestly just going to answer this question for you. Yes, you have. Everyone has. I stand by that. You can come argue with me, but I bet we could find a moment in your life where you've been envious or jealous. I can tell you one of mine. When I was in high school, I had a really good buddy make it to state wrestling, but I got jealous because I didn't. I was hurt, and that upset me, especially since, I beat him every day in practice. I was better than him, and I knew it, but I couldn't go because I was hurt, and that drove me crazy. I was envious there. Now, as I said, at some point in our life, we all are envious, and that's okay. That's, what happens. But what matters is how we react to the envy. Now, let's take a minute and let's define envy. I think there's 2 types of envy. First off, envy, jealousy. There's the one where you see somebody with a cool pair of shoes and you're like, man, I wish I had those. But that's the end of it. That's the extent of it. That ends it. And then there's a second type of envy, where when it comes to my story with wrestling, I knew I was better. And I let those emotions of jealousy, not being able to be there, the fact that I was hurt, it drove me crazy. I let it control me. I let it take over my mind. An envy that kept growing and growing and growing and growing. Something that was totally different. 2 types of envy. We're going to talk about the second one. The second one, where truly, if we're envious in that way, it will keep growing until it turns into something ugly. See, here's the thing with envy. If we don't find a way to control it or get rid of it, envy and jealousy always rear their heads, and they just grow little by little by little. We may not think about it, but envy can take over quick. Let's look what our Bible says about it. So our Bible in Proverbs. Proverbs is a great book. It's a lot of wise things. If you're looking for some wisdom, highly recommend checking out Proverbs. I just highly recommend checking your Bible for wisdom. It's a great place to find it. But in Proverbs 27:4, it says, anger is cruel and wrath is a flood. But jealousy is much more dangerous. Now I want you to take a minute. Think back to the last time you were angry. You were so mad, you were furious. Do you remember how it felt? Do you feel that way now? Now let's be honest, maybe not. Maybe some of you do, and that's okay. But most of the time, when you're angry about something, that anger subsides, it passes, you move on from it. Here's the thing with jealousy, though. It doesn't. You don't move on from jealousy like you can anger. It doesn't just go away. Because when you're jealous about something, as I told my story with my friend who made it to the wrestling state, I went and supported him. I was there at state for him. I was there at practice every day with him. Couldn't practice, but I supported him and helped him through it. But here's the thing. Every time I saw him after that, when I knew he was going to state and I wasn't, I was jealous. I let it creep up and grow and grow and grow until the point where, he made it to the second day of state, and I left because I could not see that. I could not be there and not be jealous. I let that control my life, and it was not okay. Now let's look at our Bible. We're going to look at some guys. One where envy let it take over, and that's King Saul. And the person he was envious of, and that was David. Now let's give you a little background. So King Saul is the king of Jerusalem, the king of Israel at this point in time. But he kind of broke God's rules, and so God said, hey, we're going to pick somebody else. As I'm sure you've heard of this story, David and Goliath, this little farm boy, little shepherd, comes and defeats the Goliath when nobody else could, and King Saul was so impressed with that. And then David became really good friends with Saul's son Jonathan. So over time, Saul got to know David. He began to love David. And in fact, he began to love him so much that he kind of became like a son to Saul. David did. But after a while, after battle that the Israelites were winning, King Saul started to get jealous. Because instead of giving him the credit, the people started to recognize and celebrate David. And Saul was not happy about this. And in fact, Saul got to the point where he said David has to go. Now that first part of the story is found in 1 Samuel 6 through 10. Highly recommend checking out it again. But we're going to keep looking at this story. Because at the end of this part, Saul is jealous and just wants David gone. But we jump ahead a chapter in 1 Samuel 19, verses 1 through 12. And Saul comes up with a plan. Not just to say, David, you have to go. He ends up actually trying to kill David. Because he let his jealousy grow and grow and grow and grow and grow over time, instead of taking care of it right away. Again, to the point where he tried to kill David, and when he failed, instead of just letting David run and be on his own, Saul chased him and followed him. He hunted David because he was so jealous of the recognition and the celebration David was getting. Now, the story ends out a lot better than we think. David ends up actually sparing Saul's life because Saul went into this cave by himself. He's trying to go to the bathroom. He's a king. He doesn't get much time on his own. It turns out it was the cave that David was hiding in. David ends up cutting Saul's cloak and showing it to Saul later and saying, hey, I could have killed you, but I didn't. I spared your life. I don't want you dead. And in this moment, Saul started to realize how much David loved him and how much he had loved David. At this point, they still weren't good terms because, when you try to kill each other, it kind of makes things rough, especially when David had the opportunity to kill Saul but didn't. But here's the thing. They ended up in a truce. Saul let go of his jealousy. And when he did, he realized how much he had loved David. But in the other way, even though Saul had tried to kill David, David still loved Saul through it all. Now, this story is a big one. As we know, the line of David is the line that Jesus comes from. It talks about these moments of how someone so important was envious and jealous. There's a lot more stories of how David is a jealous man. You can look them up. Some of them are pretty bad. But David also was a servant of God. He loved those people who envied him and who he envied. And I wish I could sit here and say that Saul was the same way, but I can't. I can't say that for sure. But what I can tell you is Saul's rage and envy took over him, and it made it so someone he loved, someone he saw as his son, his life was in danger and he was hunted. If we don't take care of our jealousy and our envy and show love to those people that we're jealous of, it takes over. It controls. I'll tell you how that story with my friend who went to state wrestling ends. That second day he wrestled at state, He ended up losing pretty quick. He came to me about a week later and said, "Hey man, I really wish you had been there that second day. It would have helped me." But for me, I was so jealous that he was even there and I wasn't, and I couldn't wrestle. But when he said those words to me, it made me realize how bad of a friend I had been. How my jealousy had taken over my life. My friend, who was someone I cared about a lot. We worked things out. I explained everything. He forgave me, which was amazing. But I always make him wonder, if I had been there, if I had been a support system for him, would he have done better on the second day? That's a thought that I have in my head that comes because I let my jealousy take over. That's why, instead of letting jealousy take over, we should work past these and show love and care for those people that we are jealous of. And that's what I want to talk to you about this week, is how we should love those we are jealous of. So don't forget to love those you envy, because it would make your life easier in the long run. It would have made Saul's life easier. It would have made my life different. Would have made me feel better about a spot that I knew I was in, that I put myself in. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. And if you're jealous or envious of somebody, this week instead, show them love. Support them. Be there for them. God bless.